tragically of all, there were 1,200 deaths at sea, of which we know. Since the Coalition came into government in 2013, we have been diligently restoring the security of Australia's borders. We've been diligently dealing with the shocking mess, the chaos left us by the Labor Party. It has taken time, but we have had considerable success. It is now over 830 days since a successful people smuggling venture has reached Australia. Having stopped the boats arriving, we've set out on the next task to empty and close the detention centres. I am especially proud that under our government we have removed all the children from detention in Australia and closed 17 detention centres, which the Labor Party had to open because of their mismanagement. Now, having secured our borders, we then became in a position to work to achieve greater resettlement options for the people that the Labor Party had left on Manus and on Nauru. From the time I became Prime Minister, I have been putting in place, with my Minister and my colleagues, the measures that enabled us to do that. We have significantly reinforced our ability to keep our border secure. As you've heard earlier today, our defences have never been as strong or as secure as they are today. This agreement that I'll announce in a moment has been preceded by months and months of very careful planning. So I can now confirm that the government has reached a further third country resettlement arrangement for refugees presently in the regional processing centres. The agreement is with the United States. It is a one-off agreement. It will not be repeated. It is only available to those currently in the regional processing centres. It will not be available to any persons who seek to reach Australia in the future. Our priority is the resettlement of women, children and families. This will be an orderly process. It will take time. It will not be rushed. It will be administered with the UN High Commission on Refugees and will continue to engage with the UNHCR on its implementation. I want to thank the United States for their cooperation. We have a long history of cooperation in which our two nations pursue our mutual and respective humanitarian objectives. Now, we anticipate that people smugglers will seek to use this agreement as a marketing opportunity to tempt vulnerable people onto these perilous sea journeys. As a consequence, and in long anticipation and preparation for this, we have put in place the largest and most capable maritime surveillance and response fleet Australia has ever deployed. Any people smuggling boats that attempt to reach Australia will be intercepted and turned back. Australia's border protection policy has not changed. It is resolute. It is unequivocal. Those who seek to come to Australia with people smugglers will not be admitted to Australia under any circumstances. Now, earlier this week, as you know, Bill Shorten abandoned our national interest when he voted against the legislation to strengthen the integrity of our nation's borders. There was no justification for him in doing so, other than succumbing to the left wing of his own party that, as we know, has always opposed our strong border protection policy. if the left of the Labor Party had their way, we would be back in the shocking, chaotic period of the Rudd-Gillard-Rudd years when Australia had lost control of its borders. Tens of thousands of people arrived unlawfully and thousands died at sea. We need to send, now more than ever, the clearest and most unequivocal message to people smugglers and their would-be passengers that if they seek to come to Australia unlawfully, they will not succeed. We have the means to stop them. We need the legislation that reinforces that unequivocal message. Now, I want to thank all of my colleagues. I want to thank the Immigration Minister, Mr. Dutton, who'll speak to you in a moment, and his predecessor, Scott Morrison. I want to thank my predecessor. The work that the coalition government has done in keeping our borders secure has enabled us to reach this agreement. We could not possibly have countenanced this if there were thousands of people coming to Australia or attempting to come to Australia in people smuggling ventures. This agreement is built on the security of our borders. As I set out at the United Nations a few months ago, our ability to manage one of the most generous and compassionate humanitarian programs in the world is built on a foundation of secure borders. That is the rock on which our compassion is founded. I want to particularly thank the Minister for Immigration and the hard-working men and women of Operation Sovereign Borders, combined with all of those agencies supporting the Operation Sovereign Borders team. Their work often goes unnoticed, often very deliberately unnoticed. But what they have done is enabled us to have the ability to reach this agreement. I want to note, too, that Peter Dutton, and indeed his predecessor, Scott Morrison, have suffered from constant, often vicious attacks, claims that they lack compassion, that they lack a heart. The reality is that our ability to offer sanctuary to refugees who come to Australia through orderly methods, and indeed to offer, by agreement with the United States, a resettlement option to those that Labor left on Nauru and Manus, our ability to do that, our ability to ensure that compassion is available, is only there because the strength of character of Peter Dutton, his predecessor Scott Morrison, and the remarkable men and women that Peter leads. I'll now ask the Minister to expound further on the arrangement.
Well, Prime Minister, thank you very much. Can I firstly say thank you to the staff here at MBC for hosting us today. Australian Border Force, the command here is made up of some amazing men and women. To those people who are offshore, in particular our staff on Manus and Nauru, thank you very much for the work that they do. I want to acknowledge the presence today of the CDF, Mark Binskin, also the Commissioner of the Australian Border Force, Raymond Quadlig, Major General Andrew Bottrell, to Rear Admiral Peter Laver, as well as the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police, Andrew Colvin. As the Prime Minister pointed out, Operation Sovereign Borders has been an enduring and always will be an enduring operation of this government, because the threat from people smugglers will never disappear. Whilst ever we're without world peace, whilst ever families will seek a better opportunity for their own families, there will always be irregular movements of people. We've evidenced that with thousands of people drowning in the Mediterranean already this year. We've experienced it in recent history in our own country, and we're only here today because for now 840 days we have been able to stare down the threat of people smugglers, and we make this announcement today from a position of strength. I want to pay tribute to the Prime Minister for his leadership. Former Prime Minister, the former Minister in this portfolio, Scott Morrison, This has been a significant team effort. I want to say thank you to the Prime Minister for his approach to President Obama and the discussions that have ensued at a ministerial and officials level for a long period of time. This is the latest step in Operation Sovereign Borders. I want to say to people smugglers today who would seek to exploit this announcement to try and turn it into opportunity, that we have more assets at sea, and we have been positioning those assets in recent months in anticipation of this announcement. We have more aerial surveillance than we have ever had in our country's history in peacetime to deal with this ongoing threat. They can market all they want, but the determination of our staff, of our personnel, led by me in this portfolio and ultimately by the Prime Minister, will never diminish. And we will continue to work hard to make sure that we stare down that threat, that we remove people back to their country of origin, or that we send them to third countries, the United States included, as we've announced today. I want to confirm, though, that there are other aspects to the announcement that we make today. One is that we are in final stages of negotiation with Nauru for a 20-year visa. People who are offered a settlement arrangement in the United States and refuse to take that arrangement. So this deal only applies to people who are on Nauru at the moment, prioritising women and children and family units, and with the prospect of providing assistance to others on Nauru and Manus, and including those 370-odd people who have come from Nauru or Manus and are receiving medical attention in Australia at the moment, with the intent of sending those people back to an RPC. That is the only application of this policy, and the announcement today will never, ever apply to any prospective arrivals, and let me make that very clear, and I will be making that very clear in the days to come. So that is a very important point to make. The next important point to make is that we want to send a compelling and unified message to the people smugglers. We will do that if we can get the support of the Senate for the bill that passed last week. This bill last week was compelling because we want to send a clear message to those economic migrants who are on Nauru and on Manus at the moment, who have been found not to be owed protection. Firstly, that they will never be settled in this country. Secondly, that this arrangement does not apply to them. And thirdly, that they will never ever, as the legislation provides, step foot on Australian soil. And it is very important for the people smugglers to hear that consistent message from both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. This is an opportunity for the Labor Party to join with the government and our success and send a clear message to people smugglers that we are not going to allow our success to be undermined. And so this bill will come back to the Parliament in the next sitting week, and before the end of the year it needs to be dealt with, because for it not to be would undermine our efforts in stopping boats, and we are not going to lose this battle. Again, I want to say thank you very much to all of the staff, to the Secretary of my department, Mr Bazzulo, in particular to the Deputy Secretary, Rachel Noble, Lachlan Colquhoun, all of those people, including our Ambassador on People Smuggling, Andrew Goldsnowski, many others that have led a huge diplomatic effort, but that have provided, particularly through the leadership of the Commissioner, the support to the Nauru and to the PNG governments to continue regional processing. No element of our policy will change. We still rely on regional processing, which is why Nauru will remain in its current status forever. That is, the relationship between Australia and Nauru is as strong as it's ever been, and it will continue. The 20-year visa arrangement will also apply to new arrivals, and let that be a very clear message to all people that you will not step foot on Australian soil, and we repeat that message again today. So I'm just going to ask the CDF to make some comments, and then I think beyond that some of the others will make comments, and then we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Prime Minister. The Australian Defence Force's posture in support of this operation is as strong as ever. The Royal Australian Navy patrol vessels, major fleet units, Royal Australian Air Force AP3C, surveillance aircraft and Army security elements. So we're postured for whatever may come in any contingency. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, CDF.
General Bottrell.
As most Australians are aware, we've had good success in tackling people smuggling over the last 3 years. which is largely due to some very good cooperation between more than 16 Australian departments and agencies, and also cooperation with a number of other countries overseas. As you heard the Prime Minister and Minister say, while today is 840 days since the last successful people smuggling boat arrived in Australia, there is still a significant latent threat that exists out there that we are watching very closely. As you've heard this morning, our border security arrangements have been further reinforced, which we've been working on deliberately over the last few months, specifically in preparation for this announcement, because we know that people smugglers will seek to take advantage of today's announcement to try to convince other vulnerable people to once again board boats for Australia. I have two messages today, one for the people smugglers themselves and the other for that vulnerable group of people that smugglers would seek to take advantage of. To the people smugglers, my message is simple. We have reinforced our offshore law enforcement and intelligence cooperation, and we have deployed more ships and more aircraft. We will not let you restart your illicit trade. Your boats will be intercepted and they will be returned safely. For those people who would be taken advantage of by people smugglers who want to make money from them, I would implore you, do not believe the lies of people smugglers and do not risk your life by getting onto unsafe boats. People smugglers are only interested in making money out of you. They do not care what happens once you've paid that money. Your boats, the boats that they put you on, will be detected and they will be intercepted and they will be safely returned to the country of departure. And it's important to reiterate today that the announcement that we've heard today is not available to anyone that seeks to arrive illegally in Australia after today. It is not available. Thank you. And I'll hand over to the Commissioner of the ABF, Commissioner Quadrelli.
Thank you.
Thank you, General. Let me underscore a couple of points already made by the Prime Minister, the Minister and General Bottrell. Operation Sovereign Borders has been an exceptional operational success since its inception in 2013. Since that time, we have undertaken 29 turnbacks. A lesser-known success of Operation Sovereign Borders, though, has been the many people smuggling ventures that we've been able to prevent departing from source and transit countries. That occurs through collaboration with our domestic and international partners offshore. Overnight, I've returned from Indonesia, where I've spoken to my counterpart authorities to confirm and consolidate that arrangements are still in place. And I can confirm that arrangements are extant and they're robust. Over the next days, General Bottrell and I will travel to the subcontinent, where we'll talk to other partners, India, Sri Lanka, to confirm those arrangements are still in place. We know there are pools of asylum seekers, refugees and people smugglers who would want to mount and launch ventures to this country. The points already made by General Bottrell and the Prime Minister in relation to the largest and most capable civilian maritime security presence we've ever had on the water is accurate. Those systems are supported by state-of-the-art intelligence operations and surveillance and detection systems. Any people smuggling ventures that seek to come and breach our maritime borders will be detected, intercepted and returned. The last point I'd wish to make is that the Operation Sovereign Borders construct and the joint agency task force that delivers that will remain in this building as an enduring capability to defeat people smuggling. Thank you.
Admiral, please.
Maritime Border Command is absolutely postured to deal with this threat. We've already heard about the forces, the surveillance aircraft and the patrol vessels that have been assigned under my command. I'll just talk briefly about the people. Men and women of the Australian Border Force, the Australian Defence Force, under my command, are trained, our tactics are proven, we know what we're doing, and we will deal with this threat as it arises. Thank you.
Prime Minister, when and how? Prime Minister, when and how will these transfers take place? And do you have any concerns about sending people who found to be genuine refugees to a Trump America?
The process will be an orderly one. There will be American officials from Homeland Security coming to Australia to begin the process in the next few days. We're not setting timelines. I know there's been a number of reports in the press. This will be an orderly transition, and of course the American government will carefully assess each would-be transferee to the United States.
If Trump wants to ban Muslim immigrants to the United States, will the arrangement continue under the new administration?
Well, we deal with one administration at a time, and we have, as I said, a very long history of cooperation with the United States, in which we have been able to, as we are here, we've been able to support our mutual and respective humanitarian objectives. And you would have seen the way in which we addressed that at the summit in New York only a few months ago.
Mr. Turnbull, how many refugees are the US obliged? How many refugees are the US obliged to take under this agreement? Because you talked about prioritising certain categories of people with the prospect of others. Does that mean that the deal is not comprehensive and it fails to provide resettlement for everyone in the cohort?
Well, we are not providing any more detail about the arrangements than we have today. The arrangements for the United States will offer the opportunity for refugees, both on Nauru and Manus, to be resettled, but I should stress that the priority is very much on the most vulnerable, which are family units, and of course they are located on Nauru.
Prime Minister, you say this deal applies only to those who are in the offshore processing centres. What about those people who are on Nauru who have been released into the community?
It applies to people that are on both, in the refugees in both RPCs.
What about the Iranians who don't want to go back and who aren't refugees? What about the ones who are not refugees?
Well, people to whom protection is not offered should return to their home country.
How will the 20-year visa work? The newspaper today reported that they would be left without any support, rather financial support from the Australian government. Is this correct?
Perhaps I'll ask the Minister to address that.
Well, we've been very clear, Paul, and that is that people that aren't owed protection need to return back to their country of origin. Now, it's important to point out that 650 people have already done that, including many to Iran. Under Operation Sovereign Borders, we've had an element of the operation which has been running since August, where we've been able to return a number of people to 5 or 6 different countries, and those efforts will continue. And people need to be very clear of the arrangement here. That is that if they are not owed protection, if they're offered the United States as somebody who is owed protection and they refuse to take that, then they will be subject to the 20-year arrangement on Nauru. And just to put into perspective, because you hear a lot about Nauru, there is $8 million that's just been spent on upgraded classrooms. There's $20 or $30 million that's been spent on the hospital and medical centre, and significant infrastructure that's been upgraded and provided by the Australian taxpayer. At the moment, there's also an amount of money that's paid on an ongoing basis. The treatment of people will be equal to that provided to Nauruan citizens prospectively, and that will not include financial support from the Australian government, but it will include, of course, ongoing support as is already provided for in terms of accommodation, health and education services.
Prime Minister, could I ask, virtually everyone's had a comment on the scaling up of the protection of our borders right now. Can you give us some tangible sense of how far it has been scaled up against business as usual? Would it be fair to say, for example, there is an effective doubling of the protection of our borders at the moment? And can I also ask, can I also suggest, doesn't that reflect the extent to which you see the risks inherent in taking the United States agreement public and the promotional risks of that investment?
Well, I think it's obvious that we recognise that people smugglers will seek to exploit this announcement, and that is why we have. And going back to decisions taken not long after I became Prime Minister, late last year, we have been scaling up our ability to provide the strongest possible defence and response capability in anticipation of an increased threat. So there has been a very long run-up to this announcement, and considerable preparation has gone into it, as we've described.
Is the closure of the Manus Island facility an end goal in the next 2 years, 3 years before the next election?
Well, that's really a matter for the government of Papua New Guinea. I don't know if you want to say some more about that, Peter.
Well, the only thing that I'd add to that is that the PNG government made an announcement in relation to the closure. We've supported that announcement, and that's, no news in that. Obviously, people under the agreement struck by Mr Rudd at the time, if people were owed protection, then they were to settle in PNG. Some people have already settled in PNG, and this arrangement will not be open to them. But those that have been found to be owed protection, after we have provided for the most vulnerable, starting with families on Nauru, then there is the prospect of dealing with people not just in the remaining population of Nauru, but also on Manus. But the desire, as we've said before, is to make sure that following the closure of Manus, and people smugglers should hear this very clearly, that Nauru will be an enduring presence as part of the success of Operation Sovereign Borders into perpetuity.
Can I ask about the interface with the legislation? Presumably, if these people become United States citizens, there's nothing to stop them coming to Australia through as tourists or through family reunification. Can you explain whether that is the case? And also, if the legislation is passed, how will that work? Will you have a class of US citizen who is not permitted entry into Australia?
The Senate should focus not on theoretical possibilities 30, 40 years hence, as Mr Shorten has spoken about, should focus on the security of Australia's borders today and tomorrow. There is no question whatsoever that sending the strongest and most unequivocal message to people smugglers and to people who seek to take passage with them is essential, not only in securing our borders, but enabling us to come to arrangements like the one we have just announced. The complacency is a road Labor has gone down before. It's a road that leads to drownings at sea. It's a road that leads to tens of thousands of unauthorised arrivals. And it's a road that led the people currently on Nauru and Manus to their current situation, which the Minister and I and all of the men and women that support us and whom we lead are attempting in this arrangement to resolve.
Mr. Turnbull, if you would tell us how many...
One US administration at a time, but did you speak about this arrangement in your phone call with Mr Trump last week? And how can you be confident, given that we're in the lame duck period of the Obama administration, and given Mr Trump's stance on immigration, how can you be confident that his administration will still honour this deal?
Well, we deal with one administration at a time. There is only one President of the United States at a time. These arrangements have had a long run-up, and they were the agreement was reached some time ago. There is a great deal of preparation and planning that has gone into it, and indeed in leading up to this announcement. We have a very long history of cooperation with the United States in matters of this kind, where we pursue, as we are today, our mutual and respective objectives in the humanitarian field.
Mr. Turnbull, if you won't tell us how many refugees are going to the US, isn't it fair to conclude that many, and possibly even most, will be forcibly resettled on Nauru rather than ever get a chance to go to the US?
All I can say to you is that we have demonstrated by the diligence and integrity of our response, we've demonstrated we can secure Australia's borders. We've demonstrated that we can source and provide alternative resettlement options. Those are the results. As to what others choose to write about it, I'll leave that to your judgment, if not your imagination. Thank you very much.
Minister, are you confident that it will continue under the Trump administration?
You've just been listening to a press conference there in Canberra press conference that was given by those who are involved in Operation Sovereign Border. Actually, you've just been listening there to Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull concluding that press conference. Let's just go through some of the main points of the announcement. Now, Malcolm Turnbull had said that the government has reached a further third country resettlement agreement for refugees who are currently in Nauru and Manus detention centres. That agreement has been made with the United States. It is, he stressed, a one-off agreement which will not be repeated, and it is only available to those in the processing centres. Now, the resettlement, the priorities, of course, will be the resettlement of women, children and families, those who are vulnerable. That's what the Prime Minister said. He said that it will be administered with the help of the UNHCR. Now, he also went on to add that the process will begin in the next few days or so with the arrival of officials from the Obama administration. There had been some concern that this deal would not go through under the Trump administration, which is expected to come into power in January of next year. Malcolm Turnbull also said that people who have not been offered protection in the detention centres in Nauru as well as in Manus Island will then be returned to their homes. Now, Immigration Minister Peter Dutton also added on to the announcement, saying that the government is currently in final negotiations with the Nauru government, for a 20-year visa to be offered to those refugees who refuse the US resettlement deal. He went on to stress that this is a compelling and strong message to people smugglers, and that there is a need for the Senate to support a bill to ban or to impose a lifetime ban against refugees who do arrive by boat.